Ratchet and Clank is a series that rears its head every so often, and kinda wish it was more frequent to be honest. Or at least port the older games to something more recent than the PS3, that'd also be really nice. To get back on track to the video though, today we're going to rank all the platinum trophies for the series. First thing to note, none of these games have trophies, which is why they're not on the list, save you a comment. Now I do quickly want to note that I don't think any of these games are really difficult, which actually made the ranking harder than some of the other series I've done videos for. Last thing quickly, for some of the games they have multiple versions like the PS3 and the Vita, and I'll be taking both into account for the ranking. This is really only relevant for one game on this list, which I will mention when we get to it. Last thing for real, for those who may not be super familiar with the series, Challenge Mode is basically New Game Plus, so every time I say Challenge Mode, that's what it means. Without further ado, let's get on with ranking every Ratchet and Clank Platinum trophy from easiest to hardest, starting with... Rift Apart is almost upsettingly easy. A lot was made about the price versus length of the game when it came out, and I'm not going to dig up old wounds, but personally it took me maybe 13 hours to platinum the game. In my opinion, that is a very quick and easy platinum. When I was looking through the trophy list to make this video, nothing was jumping out at me as far as hard trophies go. Like, one of the rarest is for buying all the weapons, which yes requires challenge mode, but also doesn't require much of challenge mode. Everything else can be done in your first playthrough, which is both, yeah, kinda nice, but also like, this is a fun game and I wouldn't really have minded playing more of it. You need to get most of the collectibles, but weirdly not all of them. Yeah, apparently you only need 5 gold bolts for example, which is weirdly arbitrary. Like, why did they decide not to make it all gold bolts like some later games we'll see? Same thing applies to the Lorbs as well. None of the collectibles are missable, so like I said a bit earlier, no need to replay challenge mode much. The rarest trophy is the one for returning shots with the Void Reactor and killing 10 enemies with it. It's not especially hard, but I do get why it's the rarest, as you would be very unlikely to accidentally get this, and it is a bit finicky, and let's just be honest, it's more fun shooting with the other guns, isn't it? I hope this entry didn't come across as too negative, as I do think the game is great, and my biggest problem with the game is that there wasn't enough of it. This is one of the 2 Ratchet games that dominated my life as a kid, and I'm gonna be honest, until looking at the lists again for this video, I completely forgot the PS3 re-release even had trophies. Fun fact, in the UK it was called Ratchet Gladiator. I guess we don't say dead in titles here or something. You've got your max nanotech trophies and your max upgraded weapons, but what's going to take the most time are the skill points. There's 165 in this game, while 1, 2 and 3 each have 30. Now I'm not going to go over every single one because we'd be here all day, but a few things to note. First, some of them require the hardest difficulty, which you need to beat the game to unlock, though admittedly you need to get loads of bolts anyway, 4 million to be exact, which is much easier in challenge mode because multipliers and whatnot, so you'll probably be doing a second playthrough anyway, so it's not a major issue. Other skill points require things like killing with specific weapon mods like the elements, killing a certain amount of enemies with specific weapons, or not taking any damage. Again, not going to go over all of them, but they're mostly in those categories. That is basically the long and short of it for this platinum though. This game is also not super long, even by Ratchet standards, so replaying is not a huge issue. I kind of feel like people are down on this game, and I don't know, I like it. It takes itself way too seriously, but you know, it's the mid-2000s. This belongs in the same category as Mickey Mouse's edgy coat and Shadow the Hedgehog's AK-47. It fits in right with those two. Gonna be real with you, I was 50-50 on whether to put this game or the next one higher, but this one is one of my favourite games ever made, and so I put it as easier as I just know it better and I like it more, and it's easier to play for me. That being said, God, I do love this game. This one was the other Ratchet game that I spent probably way too much time on as a kid, but it's great, so who cares? Platinum wise, the rarest trophy is for getting all the mega weapons, which requires challenge mode and basically just means to max upgrade your weapons. Other than that, you've got to do all 30 skill points. Now these are more varied than Deadlocked, despite there being way fewer of them. Again, I'm not going to go over all of them, but they're not super hard provided you know what you're doing. For example, one is for smacking the monkey around, which funnily enough is the first skill point that I got as a kid. There's also things like shooting down cameras, wrench-only challenges in the arena, or speedruns of the Quark vid comics. In addition to those speedruns, you also need to get all the tokens in each of the levels, and I quite like the minigame personally, but I think I might be in the minority there. For the most part, this is quite simple, though some of the tokens are hidden off the main path, and so you need to do a bit of exploration. There's also the titanium bolts hidden around in the game that you need to get, 40 of them in fact. If you use a guide, this is obviously easy, but if not, the one good thing is that from what I can tell, none of them are missable, so that's good. So as I said earlier, this game's platinum requirements are basically the same as Rack 3. All skill points, all special bolts, platinum bolts in this case, all upgraded weapons, like it is the same requirements. As with the previous, you need to do challenge mode to get 2 million bolts a lot easier than in the first playthrough, and associated trophies like buying the best armor with money and all weapons and everything else. Platinum bolts are the same deal as titanium bolts, hidden throughout the game but none are missable. Skill points are also for random tasks such as no damaging at grinding section or a bunch of arena stuff that I'm not going to go too in depth in. Now one thing I would get alright talking to if I didn't mention was the hoverbike races. Yes, the hoverbike races are the hardest part of the game. For skill points you need to get specific times, and yes, these are quite tight. However, personally, I didn't struggle too much on them. Like yes, they're the hardest part of the game, but it's not like tearing your hair out or anything, it just took a few more than one try. I fully expect people to disagree with that, because judging by online, a lot of people struggle with these, and that's fine. My opinion, not any better than yours, I just happen to have a microphone. Something about this game just feels really grand, and I can't put my finger on why, but I do love it. Side note, is the crack in time meant to be a play on like butt crack, like the old titles are all innuendos, or is that the same deal, or am I looking way too far into this? Anyway, platinum wise, there's no skill points to worry about, but I found there's just more substantial stuff to do instead. For example, there's a load of space missions to do in the open space. These aren't difficult and function as side quests as opposed to skill points in previous games, which are, let's be honest, just random tasks. There's also various collectibles such as gold bolts, the Zonai, and the Constructo mods. None of these are missable, so you can collect them at your leisure, plus there is an in-game map for collectibles you can get, which makes this a cakewalk. There's also a secret boss you can fight after getting all the collectibles, and I think that's neat. He's not especially hard, but secret bosses are cool, and I like when video games have them. You've also got to get all the weapons, but you've probably guessed that at this point. Finally, the game does require you to beat challenge mode for a trophy, so 2 full playthroughs are required, unlike previous games where you may have just needed half an extra playthrough, say. This is also the first game on the list with difficulty trophies, so you need to beat it on hard, though even on the first playthrough, hard is completely doable, let alone on your second challenge run. I really and ahed about whether this would go higher or lower than Rack 2, but I ultimately decided that this is higher because there's more you have to think about, plus requires the full second playthrough. Into the Nexus has the benefit of being the shortest of the traditional Ratchet games, don't fact check me on that. While this game has overall less going on than most of the previous games, I actually think it's more punishing platinum wise. Before that though, we'll start with the less unique stuff. You need to get all gold bolts, all armor, and all upgraded weapons, as well as doing all the cups in the arena. Same advice as all the other games applies. There's also 2 required playthroughs. A challenge mode run is required, and there's difficulty trophies again, with one of the 2 playthroughs needing to be on legend difficulty. Now the main reason this game is this high is the trophy Your Worst Nightmare, which needs you to use the nightmare box to scare every enemy type in the game, including bosses. That including bosses is important, as yes, they're totally missable, and if you just so happen to forget to scare them, that's another playthrough you need to do, my friend. Now this didn't personally happen to me, but I would be silly not to take it into account. I just dislike trophies where you have to manually keep track of something that seems so random. At least there aren't that many enemy types in this game, I think there's 18 including the bosses, so it is a lot easier to keep track of manually. I still don't like it though. And so we arrive at Ratchet and Clank 1. Kinda. Technically, this is the game of the movie of the game. Remember the movie? No one seemed to like it, but I liked it, so go me, I guess. For the platinum, you need to, you guessed it, upgrade all the weapons, max out your health, and get all the gold bolts. There's also other collectibles like trading cards and brains, but the same strategy applies as the gold bolts. For trophies more specific to this game, never use auto hack for the trespasser puzzles. I like these, so I wouldn't be using auto hack anyway. There's also some hoverboard races, which I don't remember struggling with in this game, but they are probably the hardest trophies. Not the most annoying though. That honor goes to Death by Disco. Everything I said about Your Worst Nightmare applies here as well. You need to make every enemy type dance, including bosses. One missed enemy, and that's another playthrough, except this game is a lot longer than Into the Nexus, so it's one place higher. It's a flawless system. There's other miscellaneous trophies too, but Death by Disco is the star here. I suppose it could be worse, as you do need to do a challenge mode run anyway, but Quark help you if you miss one enemy, you will feel like a dum-dum. Our first of two spin-offs on the list, and this is the better of the two. Is that a hot take? I don't know. It might be a spin-off, but you still need to upgrade all your weapons. Other than that though, the trophies are way more unique, which is good for me, as I have struggled through the last 3 entries. We'll start with online trophies. Now, although there are a few online trophies, only one of them actually requires another person. The one for winning a custom match. At this point there's no one on, but it's still completely doable. I used a second account with the streaming version, and that worked fine for me. There's another Groovatron dancing trophy, but nothing is missable this time, so it's a lot easy, and similarly you also need to turn 8 enemies into bunnies, not difficult when you're specifically going for it. There's also a weird trophy for running, gliding, and hover booting a certain distance. This isn't hard, but the numbers are so specific that it's probably a reference I don't get, and I wanted to mention it to see if someone else knows what the reference is. The hardest trophy in this game though is Over the Top, which requires you to beat 3 Insomniac challenge times. This is easier in co-op, but I have no friends, so I did it solo. This was probably the hardest trophy on this whole list so far, but it's not impossible even by yourself, but noticeably harder than everything else we've talked about. Now I love Ratchet 1, but boy can you tell it's the first game. For starters, there's no bolt multiplier in challenge mode, which basically defeats the point in challenge mode, but the money scaling is at least turned off for it. You have to get all gold bolts and all skill points again, but you don't have to upgrade your weapons because you can't. There's no weapon upgrading in this game. You do have to buy gold paint for them though, so there's that instead. But none of that is the reason this game is so high. Weirdly enough, it's all about the hoverboard racing. First, I will say that this is the hardest racing minigame in the series, and I don't think that's up for discussion personally. Do you remember at the start when I said both versions of a game would be taken into account? Well, that was just for this game. So the Twisty McMarks trophy is fairly easy on the PS3. You got a L1, then R1, then L2, then R2 while spinning. It might take you a few tries, but it's really not too difficult. So let's talk about the PlayStation Vita. First time anyone said that in ever. Now, I actually quite like the Vita, but it doesn't have triggers. So how do you do this trick that requires triggers? Did you know that the PS Vita has a back touchpad? I didn't know that until I tried this trophy. So the trigger buttons are mapped to the back of the Vita, and it's not intuitive at all for the timing in this trophy. It single-handedly makes the Vita plat about 5 times harder than the PS3. Is that an arbitrary number? Yes, but I am mad about it, so it's fine. And believe it or not, we're actually not even done. You see, that trophy is bad for one console, but the next is bad for both. You need to get 1 million bolts, with no multipliers. That means either play through the game a load of times, or do this glitch into the raceway and rubber band the button while you go to sleep. I know which method I did, and unless you did this legit, you can't call me a cheat. Well, they can't all be winners, although they got first place, so I guess this game is a winner at something. I would say this is the only Ratchet game I actively dislike, including the ones that aren't on this list. I mean, it's just so boring. Am I the only one that thinks that? But we gotta stay on topic. The Platinum is at least fairly unique. No, wait, no, you need to upgrade all your weapons still. Last time I'm gonna say it. One wrinkle that's added to that in this game though is that each of the 4 characters has one exclusive weapon, and obviously you need to upgrade all of them. Another mind-boggling decision is that your bolts are also character specific, so you can't even just grind all the bolts you need with Ratchet, say, and then use them to upgrade the other characters' weapons. Oh, and you also need to get 1 million bolts, thankfully just with one character. There are online trophies, but all you actually need to do is start a game. So same as Full Frontal Assault, I just used a second account and got them really easily. There's also trophies related to the unique weapons and also for each stage. These range from pretty manageable to, oh yeah, we're going to be here for a while, with a fair few being lower than 2% completion rate. What makes this even worse is that this game doesn't have a cutscene skip button. Like, what? All the other games do. Why did they pick this game specifically to not let you skip cutscenes? This makes every missed attempt take even longer to get back to. I never want to touch this game again. I know at the start I said pour all the older games, not this one. This one can stay buried for all I care. Maybe you can argue this isn't the hardest, but it's the one that wastes my time the most, and honestly that's worse. And that's the list. Did you agree? Did I put Full Frontal Assault too high or Cracking Time too low? Let me know all that and more in the comments, and while you're down there, press the like button and why not subscribe too, to make it easy to check out my other videos, both old and new. Didn't realise how samey the trophy lists were until I sat down to do the script, so hopefully you enjoyed me saying to upgrade your weapons a bunch. You won't forget it anytime soon. For now though, thank you for watching, hunt them tropes, and I'll see you next time.